We are heading to a runoff. We just don't know who yet. The race is getting tighter. 3 of the 16 candidates have a shot. So we'll look at how their policies on housing and homelessness could shape the city. The main race is over. So what happens to all the political yard signs cluttering our streets and sidewalks? As students at East High School walk into class for the first time in 2 weeks, students at other schools across the state walk out to send a message about gun violence and school safety.
It's a nationwide effort, and that's just one piece in this big puzzle.
And this week, we can help low-income Coloradans get the help they need to go to college. So let's make a difference in their lives, because this is next. If you turned on the TV tonight, hoping to find out who the next mayor of Denver will be, we do not have that answer yet. We are heading to a runoff, and the race to make it in is getting tighter. Mike Johnston remains in first place with a comfortable lead, but progressive candidate Lisa Calderon is inching closer to Kelly Brough and second place. The latest data drop came in about an hour ago. Johnston's lead grew. He's got about 25% of the vote. Brough is in second with 20.6%. Calderon now up to 17.4%, about 4,900 votes behind Johnston. The math is still in Brough's favor with 23,000 ballots left to count. If Calderon moves ahead to second place, it sets up an interesting dynamic in the runoff between Johnston and Calderon. Andy Rougeau remains in fourth place. He conceded this afternoon. The ballots that are being counted right now are the ballots that were turned in just before 7 p.m. last night. The Denver Clerk and Recorder's Office tells us that 31% of all ballots were turned in between 5 and 7 p.m. Politics guy Marshall Zellender is here. Marshall, there are still enough ballots to be counted where there could be some movement.
I'm one of those ballots, by the way. Yeah, the math does not look good for a change at the top. I want to take you through the last 3 results updates, starting with last night. At the end of the night, Mike Johnston was about 2,700 votes ahead of Kelly Brough, and Brough led Lisa Calderon by 7%, 7,600 votes. Again, the top 2 advanced to the runoff. Well, at 2 p.m., we got the update, no change at the top, but the gap between Brough and Calderon shrunk to just less than 6%, and instead of 7,600 votes apart, 7,000 separated the two. And at 5 p.m., it got closer. Johnston still at the top, 3% difference between second and third, 4,800 votes or so. There are about, as you said, 23,000 ballots that remain to be counted. If the runoff is between the top 2, issue-wise, there's not going to be much separation. But if Calderon gets to the runoff, you'll have 2 distinctly different choices. Hugs and happiness at Mike Johnston's party last night. He remains in first and appears headed to the June 6 runoff election for Denver mayor. Kelly Brough was feeling the vibe at her party, as was Lisa Calderon, who cautioned Denver voters to wait for every ballot to be counted. Those are your top 3. Only 2 will be on the ballot in June. If the results do not change, there is not much separation in ideology. Johnston and Brough want to hire more Denver police officers. Calderon wants more crisis responders and mental health support. Johnston and Brough will enforce the camping ban. Calderon will not. The one difference on this chart for the top 2, Brough said she would forcibly arrest people in violation of the camping ban if they do not accept help being provided. And on the possibility of Denver enacting a form of rent control, the top 2 oppose. Calderon supports. Johnston and Brough both supported ballot issue 2.0 to allow the development of Park Hill Golf Course. Since they are currently 1 and 2, we asked them last night, since 2.0 failed, what's their next move?
I've been very clear with voters. If voters say no to Park Hill Golf Course, I'll honor it. And I'll make sure we honor their wishes.
The next mayor has to go back to the drawing board and figure out what's possible in that location and figure out how to work with all the stakeholders who didn't feel like this represented their vision and see what else it can become. I don't think anyone has a goal for it to be a fenced-off piece of private property without access to public space, but now we have to go back to the drawing board and start over.
Let's do something that journalists should not be doing. Math. If I remember my percentages correctly, I tried to calculate at the 2 o'clock data drop how much of those votes, and I think it was 12,000 votes that came in at 2 o'clock, how much went to Brough versus Calderon, and it was 22%, I believe, for Calderon and 16% of that data dump for Kelly Brough. At 5 p.m., 23% of those votes that changed went to Calderon and still 16% for Brough. It's narrowing this gap, but Calderon needs to increase that percentage difference from 23-16. It needs to be closer to like 28%, 30% of the remaining votes to be able to make a change. And the math doesn't look like that right now.
Marshall, I got into this job so I didn't have to do math, and here we are. When do we get more ballots? When's the next drop come in?
Not tonight. These are your numbers tonight. They'll continue to count the 23,000 or so ballots, and I'm sure we'll get that tomorrow. And don't forget, if you forgot to sign your ballot or if there was an issue with your ballot for whatever reason, it's your first time voting and you never provided ID, you can still cure it because your ballot hasn't been counted yet. So those ballots that are just holding off to the side right now could still alter some of these results, but that won't be known entirely until next week.
Still a long way to go. Marshall, thank you. Some of the city council races also remain very tight. Democratic Socialist Candy Tabaka is now leading in the 9th Council District. She faced a tough re-election bid against Darrell Watson, who's funded by developers. Another progressive candidate, Sarah Parody, could possibly join her on council. She's in 2nd place in the at-large seat for city council. Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez remains in 1st place. Marshall mentioned the Park Hill Golf Course. Developing that land lost big time, a wide margin. 20% separated the no's from the yeses. So what happens next? That's still a little unclear. The proposed development will not move forward. That much we know. Westside Investment Partners still owns the property. They'll close the site to public access, but we asked them if they'll sell the land or restore it to a golf course, but the spokesperson did not say. The people against the proposal believe the golf course can become a big park. The city says it's not that easy. Now, the biggest question on voters' minds is, when will we know the final results? That's a fair question. We asked Denver Clerk Paul Lopez about what's a realistic time frame here. We didn't have exactly a straight answer here. Clerk Lopez just said that they're counting as fast as they can. Here are the numbers they're dealing with. The clerk's office says 175,000 Denverites voted. 55,000 of those ballots were dropped off in the past 2 hours. That's the big graph on the far right there that you see. Turnout among active voters is 38%. That's on par with 2011, a little higher than 2015, but lower than 2019. Clerk also took questions on ranked choice voting, something that we've talked a lot about on this show before. Ranked choice voting is, it would ask voters to rank their choices instead of picking just one candidate option. That wouldn't necessarily speed up ballot counting.
It would depend on ballot length and number of cards. For example, if we had ranked choice voting in a statewide primary, it would probably take us a little longer, but it wouldn't be longer than the same number of candidates in a plurality election.
So we got the first bid data drop at 7 p.m. last night. The second bid dump we expected at 8:30 was really more of a trickle. Only 2,500 ballots were counted. Can blame that, turns out, on the barbecue. Everyone was having dinner.
It was Famous Dave's. It was delicious.
We've been through some of those most difficult circumstances that I've ever had to deal with or dream of as a clerk and recorder. 2020, 2021, the pandemic, the misinformation. When I have to see my election judges, our election judges and staff vilified on TV, they are doing this because they believe in the democracy. The least that we can do is provide them dinner and a break.
And we thank them for their work. If there is a recount in any of those races, the margin would have to be within 0.5% for any of the top candidates. Kwame Spearman didn't make it to Election Day. He dropped out of the mayor's race a few weeks ago, and now he's stepping away from his role as the CEO of the Tattered Cover. Spearman says he'll stay on as an investor in the company. His run for mayor and his support of center-right politics caused some friction with Tattered Cover's owners and customers. He told Kyle it would be best to separate politics from his role there. But that doesn't mean he's stepping away from politics and all of that. Spearman says he's considering a run for the Denver School Board at-large seat this November. He says he'll wait until after the June mayoral runoff before deciding. If he does run, it could set up an interesting clash with Aonte Anderson, the current school board vice president. They have some really big ideological differences. Well, every week you step up to help Coloradans $5 at a time. You've raised more than $10.5 million through our Word of Thanks campaign. Kyle's off today, if you haven't noticed. He still has another way to help this week.
Colorado prides itself on being a well-educated state, but one place where we fall short is getting our brightest first-generation college students through that process. That's why this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign spotlights Minds Matter Colorado. They're a group that connects some of the brightest young people in low-income families in Denver, Aurora, and Colorado Springs and pairs them with mentors for a 3-year process preparing them to finish high school and end up in a college situation that will work for them. It means weekly college prep sessions and that one-on-one mentorship that allows them to envision a future that perhaps they never imagined for themselves. Text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 to join me in giving to Minds Matter Colorado. As always, I'll get us started by matching the first 50 donations of $5. There are students with incredible potential all across Colorado who just need that extra help, that boost, that vision to get them into a 4-year education. Minds Matter Colorado is getting it done.
Students return to school 2 weeks after a school shooting. East High has been walking out to call for better safety and security at school. Now other schools are taking the lead. Those colorful signs littering our sidewalks and streets are all over Denver. So what happens now that most of the candidates aren't even in the race anymore? Next. Students at East High School returned to class today for the first time in 2 weeks when a student shot 2 administrators inside the school. A large crowd welcomed them back to school this morning. There were therapy dogs and a banner that said, "Columbine supports East High." For the first time in a few years, there were also armed police officers inside East. They will be there through the end of the school year. The district said a small number of families have unenrolled from the school, but they did not have specific numbers on that. Students were supposed to be in class today. They were supposed to be learning about math and science and everything else. But thousands of students across the entire metro area said they don't feel safe doing that. Today, they walked out of class.
Enough is enough! Enough is enough!
Change doesn't usually happen overnight.
Enough is enough!
But from Lakewood to Denver and across the metro area, every chant and every step sent a message.
We're here to protest against the gun violence in our schools, especially in our district, and all the shootings that have been happening around America, and the lack of action that's been happening from the government.
It started at East High School more than a month ago. 2 shootings in a matter of weeks. Students said school was no longer safe and took their fears to the Capitol.
What do we want? Safe school! When do we want them?
Today, the message spread. Students across the state walked out of class and into the streets. At George Washington and Thomas Jefferson high schools, they gathered outside. At Maury Middle School, students waved signs pleading for change. And in Lakewood, high schoolers who say one shooting is one too many.
There has been too many killings, especially of young children in elementary schools, and I don't stand for it. Nobody should stand for it. It's a horrible epidemic running through schools.
There is fear, there is protest, but the question remains, when will there be change? Democratic lawmakers here in the state of Colorado are in the process of passing a slate of new gun laws limiting access to firearms. There's also bipartisan support for a new Office of School Safety. In both instances, we've heard lawmakers say student protests have impacted how they voted.
That sunshine out there early this morning, a little deceiving. Temperatures on the cooler side. This afternoon into this evening, the cloud deck certainly swiftly moving in, and a little bit of light snow. Just a couple of flurries here around parts of the Denver metro area. Those all starting to shift off to the east tonight. We'll be left with partly cloudy skies here around the city about 11 o'clock. All the snowfall moves out overnight into tomorrow morning. We kick off the day with plenty of sunshine. Things looking good for the Rockies home opener in the afternoon, and then mostly clear skies is going to be the name of the game as we head into Easter weekend. This ridge of high pressure is going to rotate closer into Colorado, and that's going to allow our temperatures to warm up quite a bit. Tomorrow, daytime highs returning to the low 50s here in the metro area with 30s up into the high country. Back to the 60s we go on Friday, and wow, Easter weekend beautiful with plenty of sunshine, highs in the upper 70s and low 80s with the potential for high fire danger early next week.
Drive anywhere and they're hard to miss. Political yard signs are popping up in yards, lining our sidewalks, and in some cases, they're a bit of an eyesore. So if the candidates don't pick them up, what does it take to get them removed? get ready for some paperwork. Next. I have a challenge for you. Try driving down any block through Denver without seeing a political yard sign. It's impossible. You can't do it. They're everywhere, even on public property where they shouldn't be. If you want the city to come pick up those signs in the public right-of-way, turns out you'll have to file a complaint. Today is a special day. Let's call it Throw Away Your Yard Sign If Your Candidate Didn't Make It to the Runoff Day. But who's tossing all those yard signs campaigns put on public property?
We do respond to complaints about things in the right-of-way, such as signs, political signs.
That's Shay Scott. Turns out it's his job.
We're all for people voicing their opinions, but just make sure you do that on your private property.
Denver doesn't allow campaign signs in the public right-of-way, but the city won't necessarily remove them unless Shay and his team at the Denver Department of Community Planning and Development get a complaint. They're the same people that respond to complaints of people not shoveling their sidewalks or overgrown vegetation in front of homes.
If someone catches it and says, hey, what are you doing with our sign? We'll say, you can definitely have that in your private property, but otherwise it's not allowed in this public area.
You can keep your political yard sign up in front of your house all year long if for some reason you're into that. For the rest of them, it's time to go. The complaints are coming. So the city received a total of 1 complaint today. You know who you are. Denver will respond to all the complaints that they get, even if it's just one, but ask that people just help them out and dispose of all the yard signs that they put up on street corners and public spaces. Even when Kyle's not here, we end every show the same way, with your feedback. That's next.
There are young Coloradans who will excel in higher education and go on to very successful careers if they can just be convinced that that is the life track for them. Perhaps one reason why they can't picture it is because it hasn't been the life track for their parents or their grandparents. Minds Matter Colorado works to get bright minds from low-income students in Denver, Aurora, and Colorado Springs through college. They provide years of mentoring, and when students are approaching their college years, they get them into summer programs at some of the most elite schools in America so that they can picture themselves in those environments and they realize they can hang with the best of the best. Text thanks to 303-871-1491 to join me in giving to Minds Matter Colorado as we help to pave that path to college for more and more of Colorado's young people whose families don't have a history of going to college.
Let's get to some feedback. Jerry says, I watched 9 News coverage of the student protests at East High School today. They're quite sincere and heartfelt. They are wasting their time. Don't tell the students that. They're powerful. And one more. Mark, fantastic job anchoring Next for the first time. You are my favorite anchor. Love, Mom. You knew that comment was ending that way.